Hello everybody, welcome to an intense conversation about architectural ornament. I am Dulcie Horwitz, I'm an architect.
I'm Brianna Carlin, and I'm a show set and facility designer.
And I'm Nathan Fisher, and I'm an architectural manager.
Now, I have to say, for all you who don't know us, Brianna and I are a little bit in the same camp here, and then there's Nathan. And I want to say, Nathan asked me earlier, why am I on the other side? Why am I different? And I would say it's because you don't respond to architectural ornament quite the same way. You don't appreciate, you don't gel on it, you don't need it, whatever. But let's start this whole conversation off with some very basic academic notions, which maybe you might want to fast forward through if you don't really are interested. It's not clearly not for everybody. Okay, so let's talk about it. Like back in 1908, Adolf Loos. Is it Loos? Loos? Loos. Okay, so Adolf Loos wrote an essay about ornament and crime. He basically equated the two. He said that if anything's ornamented, that it's a sign of a degenerative society, that if you have the need to like tattoo your face or to take a cigarette box and like do scrolly work on it, that you are not elevated, you are not cultural enough. And he goes on about how it wastes money, it wastes time, and generally the idea of the essay is that art and culture has been elevated beyond the surface. And I think what it engendered was this notion, that this suspicion about what are you hiding? Like, is it fake? Yeah. And are you so easily seduced by surface? Yeah. Right? Yeah. Well, the funny thing is that I remember you actually did one of your school projects on Lowe's.
And honestly, I like that you brought up the interiors. Right. Because I actually do like what he tries to do.
Sectionally?
Yes, sectionally.
Space-wise?
Is so cool. He actually does a lot of vision, because he's not about ornament. He tries to do things visually to catch your eye with other materials, because it's all about where your eye hits in different spaces.
But the weird thing about it is that I understand where he's coming from, and I think this is something that's up your alley, Nathan, is the idea that the materials speak for themselves, right?
Definitely. I mean, I quite honestly haven't really studied much of his architecture. I don't think I've seen these pictures before.
Well, it's interesting because he's so anti-ornament and visuals, you would think that he would be anti-visuals across the board. But it's really just ornamentation that he was... But then you go to the exteriors.
This is the inside of this project.
Yes, I mean, that's the outside.
Yes, that is the outside.
In his essay, he goes on about how he would love it if every building everywhere was like this, and it was just these white forms. And, you could make an argument for form making and shadow and stuff like that.
I mean, this looks like a trope of someone designed the interior and then just the exterior was whatever.
Yeah, and just gave up. Like, seriously, ran out of money or gave up.
The front, I see he's trying to do something, but that side is good photo, but it's just like...
so bleak, right?
Yeah. Okay, the windows end up wherever they end up.
So the reason why we're talking so much about him, though, is because then around, the time of Le Corbusier, Mies van der Rohe, Walter Gropius, also, again, we've talked about this before, but after World War I, World War II, they were trying to move away from neoclassicism and all the things they were trying to break in and make a new language, right? Yeah. And so I think they used Loos's ideas about ornament and crime to springboard into this new architecture, less is more kind of blank, stripped architecture of the international style. And I think that suspicion with ornament was pretty much in high-level architecture throughout the entire 20th century was very colored with suspicion about ornamentation. I mean, ornamentation was very looked at.
I mean, it's like, it still feels that way though. Like you're describing all these things and it does you can't help to think that it still feels that way in contemporary world.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Well, why do you think it's still like that?
I think it's like you think of like HGTV, for example.
Oh, are you gonna drag architecture and ornament right down to HGTV?
I mean, but like that's like, it's like, or why people like farmhouses now. A traditional house costs less to build than a modern house because there's crown molding to cover things up.
Sure.
There's the walls a little crooked, like the baseboards and things like that can be straightened out. But in a modern house or whatever, on these photos, for example, there's none of that. There's no trim, there's no moldings, there's no detail. It's less sophisticated. You have to add all that decoration to
It's less
make
technical,
Yeah.
less forgiving.
Well, I was just going to say, except that when you're experiencing it,
Sure.
do you really stand in there and go, oh, I bet all of this detail is to cover stuff up?
No,
I
it
mean,
is. It's a very architect-y thing. It's just like an architect
Yeah.
talking just to
You
other
mean it like-
architects. Well,
okay.
they like character.
I
They
am an
like-
architect and I like ornamentation, so let's not separate the
Yes.
two. And I think what you're saying too is that, there's a certain sort of flexing of your muscles as an architect when you don't need to cover up anything and materials just say what they are and they
Yeah.
come together so perfectly that you don't
Yeah.
need to hide the seams. There's a certain sort of pride in that, but all of these different eras, whether it be Art Nouveau or Neoclassicism or Neo-Gothic, all of these things, Beaux-Arts, they were all thrown totally out in the world of academic
It's nuts. And that is,
architecture.
I think that is tragic. And we're coming at it from a more modern perspective. I gave examples of maybe poor construction quality or something
Sure,
like
sure.
that, right? These are built well. These are solid stone,
Right.
heavy,
I mean,
well
a lot of those
executed.
in there are structural
Like,
feats.
yeah, like
Yeah.
years to build these
Yeah.
things, like monuments. I never really thought about it that way, like where that time that Los is in, like, what a jerk. He's like, he's like throwing out all that like great stuff.
Well, but I tell you, I think where Los is coming from, and in aesthetics, I think it comes down to this, and they're not totally wrong. Like, it's a Britney Spears. Like if you tap your foot to Britney Spears,
Yeah.
which
Oh,
I fully
uh-huh,
do,
uh-huh.
which I
Sure.
Yes.
fully do.
Bring the bass in and I'll take it.
Yes.
And so this kind of does
It-
get you into
There's
that.
a bottom
For
fitting.
sure.
You called it McDonald's. Like there's
Sure.
a lower echelon where it's easier
Yeah.
to grab people's attention. It's
Yeah.
easier to draw them
Which I
in.
think of that time, they were in this fear too of that it could be used.
Manipulatively.
Yes, propaganda.
Yes.
Like that's exactly where I was
Yeah,
going.
yes.
Yes.
It
That's
can be
important.
used to manipulate
To get-
masses. Yes.
To get the masses riled up, right? It's post World War II.
Yeah,
There are serious reasons
exactly.
why they want to get away from art being manipulative.
Yes.
The idea is that the art should make you think.
Yes, I was
It
just
should
gonna
be
say
harder
that.
to
It's
come
like,
by.
yes, exactly. It's that thought of like, we don't want people thinking for themselves and
Yeah.
manifesting these ideas,
Yeah.
manifesting these movements, having the ability to have that choice to rebel or go along with it. Yes.
Right.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I
Suppression.
understand why the urge is there. It's just that all of those movements got thrown out. Never mind, like the ancient, whether it's Cambodia or India,
Mhm.
Moorish or whatever, Celtic, like all of these things just got completely
Yeah.
thrown out and are no longer considered part of the architectural landscape or part of even your tools as an architect. We won't go too deep into this, but Deleuze wrote a brilliant book, and if anyone would like to read it with me again, I would love that because
It's on my shelf.
okay, it is hard. It takes.
It's this thing.
Yeah, this
It's
looks
this
so.
thing, this thing.
This whole
and
slide is like so dense. Like I can't everything I recommend.
well, and I have to say that even just getting through the translator's foreword for this, we're talking about this book. It's from Gilles Deleuze. It's called The Fold, and it's about Leibniz and the Baroque. And he makes a complete argument for the disillusion of like the surface of like the ceiling, or you can't tell where the wall starts and stops,
Mhm.
and how that is actually important, and that it speaks to math and mysticism and chaos theory and all kinds of stuff, and it's not a sign of a degenerative culture. Most of the time when people think, when you get to the Baroque, and certainly the Rococo, I mean, that
Yeah.
most people,
Yes.
Nathan's having palpitations as we bring up Rococo because he's breaking out in a sweat, because most people just are like, so they just think it's just so horrible.
Yes. It's only icing.
It's
That's all.
only icing.
There's
I am,
no
and I'm
substance. There's no
right, and I'm fully down for it. I am fully down for the icing and the cotton candy and
Yeah.
all of that. But just know that there are other people, contemporary philosophers out
Yes.
there that are very well read, that are actually making an argument for the anti-Los thing, loose, Los, whatever. All right, there are areas of ornamentation that I think are worth talking about. One of my favorite is the Moorish carvings of the walls, the tessellations on the ceiling. This ceiling in the Alhambra is actually above a body of water, so that it looks like it's an infinity thing. This is the opposite of form following function. That ceiling in the Alhambra is all
Yes.
about how the
Right.
heck is it even
Yes.
standing up?
Yeah.
This was supposed to be, a temple towards the
Yeah,
mystics.
a lot of these are religious that tend to be all of this type of
Right.
extra ornament.
Fantastical.
Yeah.
Ooh, fantastical.
Mhm.
Not that that's derogatory in any sort of a way, right?
Is it?
Well, as soon as you said
The way you say it.
yeah. There. Oh.
Oh,
Yeah.
that is beautiful.
Yeah.
Is it?
I like this. Yeah.
You like Louis Sullivan?
I do like Louis
I'm
Sullivan.
not
Okay.
actually surprised
Yeah, I do.
that Nathan.
You
weren't.
But I liked
No.
him, I think, before I went to architecture school. Just like
Oh.
I studied him, like sort of before I went through that system, and
Okay.
so
Sure.
he was always one of my favorites. There's an appreciation for things that he did. I remember like telling
On an
someone
engineering
about that.
side too.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, I
like
think-
a
Oh.
structural
I think
side
because
as
I
well.
studied Frank Lloyd Wright before I went to Upper as one does, and
Right,
before I
right.
got to architecture school, and Frank Lloyd Wright worked for Louis Sullivan. He was
Right.
like a protege of his. So I
Right.
was like, well, who's that then? And so because no one knows who that is, right? Everyone just knows.
And I
Frank Lloyd
can't
Wright.
believe that
But
nobody does.
I
You
know
this
it's
is
sad. It is
yeah.
sad.
this stuff blows my mind.
Bringing it back to why I like it, I think, is that it has those elements to it, but it is still like has structure. He built 6-story, 10-story, 12-story buildings, which hadn't been done before, right? And he's like, and he's folding in this amount of detail and ornament to it in a way to sort of express it, right? I think that's how
Yeah.
he viewed it as
Oh.
being beautiful. I think.
He does these very square skyscrapers, then adds this organic
Yeah.
Yeah.
thing in a really,
Yeah.
really clever way. And
Yeah.
I think that's why it's like extra appreciated on both sides.
And maybe to
because
make it a
do
little more
well.
approachable and like so people like it. I think he's trying to like do this. I think he was trying to do a service, right? Not just build like skyscrapers and things. He wanted to make them look a little pretty, so
Yeah.
that people would like it.
Oh, that's adorable.
Yeah, I know.
He
exactly.
wanted to make him look a little pretty.
Yeah.
And whereas, by the way, like I have 0 pictures of the whole building. I only have pictures
Yeah.
of the ornamentation.
Just the ornamentation.
I'm like, is that 6 stories tall? I don't know. I only zoomed in and went, holy crap! Look at that ornamentation.
Yeah.
But I get your point, and I get how then he's straddling both sides. Amazing. Oh, okay.
Mhm.
So Gaudi, I want to know what you think about Gaudi, Nathan.
I mean, I have a strong appreciation for him, but I think I go back.
I appreciate.
No,
it.
I do,
For
and
what
I
it
think
is.
he I think his study of geometry. I think there's a real rigor to the things that he's.
Oh,
he
okay.
did too. I think in a way, sort of where
Well, you're right about nature.
Like, there's an
you know,
innovative-
the catenary curves
right,
and all that.
right. That's the sort and like how he figured out the
Gravity.
Sagra
He did
familiar
really
with the
easily.
gra- yes.
Once again, a lot of
Structural.
structural
Yeah,
engineering.
yeah. I think that I
went
like.
into
That's
a
why I
lot of
like.
his work.
I think Louis Sullivan and Gaudi are probably one and the same in a little bit because they're pushing the engineering that they had in their time,
Mhm.
and I think Gaudi too then had this fascination with painting and art and the use of color and things like that to then sort of combine those things together, right?
So
'Cause
do you
was
think
just
it
like a
detracts from his structural feats that he?
No, I think in him particularly, he was very careful to make sure it accentuates it, right? I
Okay.
mean, like the use of sort of the scales that are in
The-
scales are the same shape as the cut hole in that bell tower,
Right.
and it kind of just accentuates it, and the whole thing is the same shape. It's like the shape and a shape, and it
Within a
is
shape.
so
Mhm.
right.
So you actually see rigor, whereas I see playfulness. But I mean, you are right. There is rigor to it, and maybe that's why the playfulness is palatable, because otherwise it would just look like a hot mess.
Yeah, or
Yeah,
look
that's
like
true.
a
You know,
Salvation
that's true.
Mountain. Do you know what that is?
No,
That's like sculpture in the desert where it's just kind of a hodgepodge because it was like some guy's junkyard.
Oh,
so
okay.
it's just like pink and blue car hoods and trash
Stack
and
of
graffiti,
stuff.
and it's like Instagrammers go there and things like that. But it's similar palettes and things, but that doesn't have no one designed that. It's
Right,
just a
yeah,
thing. And
Right.
so,
I see what you're saying. So because he does have a certain sort of base, sort of structure and rigor to it, that's what supports and allows it to be so over the top and expressive. But Los would not approve.
yeah, it's so sad.
And then of course I love Art Nouveau.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Any thoughts about Art Nouveau?
I mean, I don't love this as much, but
because
I think that it can look a little sort of, I don't know what the word
Kitsch.
is. Yeah, kitschy pastiche. And like a lot of Parisian structures have this lot of sort of the European
Yum yum yum.
sort of things like that. Like I think that, and a lot of people, and I think because it permeates into other things. Like people take this and like, oh, I want my, my fence to look
There's
more
lots of
Parisian,
generic
so I'm gonna
versions
just
of
put
it.
well,
Art Nouveau in it.
I
there's
guess,
always
same.
that. People have Frank Lloyd Wright clocks.
Yeah, that
and,
bothers
you know,
me too.
I mean, yeah.
But I think this in a way isn't taken as seriously. I can't really pinpoint why. It feels like it's not taken as seriously.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I don't have that experience at all. I just look at this and I think, oh my God, this is it. Like, this is the pinnacle for me. Like, being able to organically, you know, do a building that actually looks like it could potentially be a tree. I mean, this is like Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
Like, you know, this is like that elfin, whatever that place was, you know, up in the mountain. Do you?
I do know what you're
Yeah.
talking
Okay.
about,
Right.
but I
You
would
know,
not know the name.
I wouldn't either. You know, but
like the Shire. Like
no, that's the Hobbit one. Rivendell. Oh my God, it is Rivendell. I do believe it's Rivendell, but there's a certain, and you would call it fantastical, right?
Right. Yes.
Because
yes.
I think maybe the reason why you're not akin to it is because it doesn't actually express the structure. I think it's almost anti-structural. It's almost like it's floating.
Which I like. There's like a tensillation
right,
to it.
and there's a fluid kind of like organic feel to it.
It makes me uncomfortable.
Oh my God!
I just think about like having to draw that and just deal with it. Like
Oh
it's just like
my
how do you
God.
dimension it?
Worth it.
Oh my God!
Like
If someone asked me to draw this, I'd
like,
do it for free.
Well,
so I think we can end that particular
Okay.
Art Nouveau thing with just saying that it makes Nathan uncomfortable.
Oh yeah, it does.
There's all these other worlds. Like, I love Celtic stuff.
Oh yeah.
You know, this is okay. Asian and Indian, certainly the rock cut temples where they incise it into the side, and you do full on sculptures.
And
where does the sculpture stop and start? Where does the building start?
Correct.
Like, I mean, like, this stuff is incredible to me. Okay, so now is when we start to like broach into what was considered kind of more modern art ornamentation. I think that the Scarpa,
I was just
I
going to say that. Scarpa.
love. Scarpa is amazing, and to say that that's
love
not
that.
ornamentation. It is ornamentation.
Yeah, who says it isn't?
Right? I mean, it is straight up ornamentation.
There's
I think
zero
it is,
function to
No.
that, and it looks
Hard.
amazing.
Hard agree. Yes.
Right, and so where would you fall in Scarpa then?
Oh, I really like him. Yes,
Okay.
yes, and I think he does a lot of, as does Frank Lloyd Wright, creative uses with water in his architecture. I think he's
so
and in a way that's purposeful, but it is. It's like he could just have it just drain and do whatever, but he'll create like window ornamentation that like will just funnel water around just to make it look cool.
And I would say all of these are less like Gaudi and like Art Nouveau. These aren't more is more. They do it in a very like moments. I feel like they don't do.
Yes.
They're more.
Yes.
I
Yes.
don't.
Yes.
It's not everywhere.
Yeah.
It's not. It's very very different than I think a lot of the.
Sparingly.
Yes. Sparingly.
And there's like a little bit of a consistency to it, right? Like they'll come up with a pattern and then keep doing it. Whereas I feel like the Art Nouveau or things like that, and what you guys like about, I mean, there's patterns to all those historical examples, but I think those Art Nouveau examples, especially one where you point out that it's asymmetrical, it's very unique and different as you move through the spaces, and it's not like that same, wood detail translates to the light, translates to the door handle, like it sort of doesn't, it's different, right?
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, like the Art Nouveau, the staircase, that language does translate, to all of it. But
maybe I just don't understand it, right? Maybe there's like a level of that I understand.
I think just Art Nouveau for you is that makes me really curious. I want to dig a little deeper on the Art Nouveau thing. But no. Because I will say that definitely Frank Lloyd Wright falls more into that the thing that where there's a repeat, it's more carved, and I think it started with Maybeck. But he was the king of like giving your eye a place to rest and having planar surfaces and then going crazy at like the top. So these guys, we're looking at this slide that has Scarpa, Frank Lloyd Wright, and then on the very right is Green and Green, Gamble House. There is some notion there that it's starting to transition away from just simple carvings of the surface into something a little bit different. And then when you get into where we are today, now I feel like where we are today is that the only options we have as architects for ornament is pattern. And that's it. We can't
some material changes.
Sure, like material and pattern. We can't sculpt anything. You can, but certainly nothing like from Gaudi or Celtic or anything like that. Where we are now, I feel the only options we have are what material are you using and what pattern are you going to put the material in? Or are you going to Frank Gehry it and make it like
Right, because you were sort of describing that these don't feel sculpted in the same manner as a Gaudi or a...
Right.
But, I mean, some would argue that Gary's work is sculpted and that those massings are... There's scale and proportion to it. I think that, at least in these images, I think the pattern is sort of a result of, the technology and working in the computer and I think it's so easy to do.
What do you mean it's a result? That it facilitates it, or that because we work in the computer, that's what you end up with?
I think it's both. It's because we work in the computer, simple things as copy paste. I think that's how we end up with these patterns. And at least some of these are created by computer generated technologies, whereas if you're thinking about working in a material like clay, like Gaudi did,
or the terracotta that
or
a
material where you're sort of
and
you're constrained to your pull of the paper.
And are you saying that the cost of the ornamentation is part of the ideology?
I don't know.
Because no one would ever hire an architect to go carve something in the backyard and
labor and
and then to actually make it into something that can be waterproofed we're beyond. I mean, it was so cost prohibitive at this point.
I mean, these still cost a lot of money. I think there's still everything's expensive, but you're right. Like, to have the architect sit there and carve something, probably not paying for that.
And have it neat code.
Yeah.
But I do agree with you that Frank Gehry's work is sculptural in nature. The actual form of the building becomes the sculpture as opposed to just being, as there any ornamentation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, I love all of these photos. I think they're amazing, and I'm drawn to them. It's just that as an architect, I don't feel like I can play around with any of the things that Gaudi did. And certainly nobody's asking me and my firm to do it. I put like a little bit of a slot with a stained glass thing in it, and it immediately jacks the budget up 1,000 times. You know what I mean? Let alone, can I put a lady on the corner of your building? I mean, that's just not happening, Now, okay, so the other way I think people do it too, beyond pattern making, okay, is I think people are actually taking to form making, kind of like Gehry, as an ornamentation.
Right.
Like the building on the top, these idea of this porcupine, like with all of the decks and everything, that there's a texture to that that starts to then sort of take the place of ornamentation the way that I would perceive it, meaning that there's so many layers to look through. There's so many directions for the eye. This is not the international style.
No.
This is not less is more, minimalist architecture.
Mm-hmm. And as you walk around it, it's doing different things.
Yeah,
Light catches it in
definitely
different
not.
ways,
Yeah.
Or Zaha, even using some of the, sun shading or the grill work on the glass or the actual form, then there is ornamentation, but the scale is so huge.
Yep.
Right.
Again, that it's kind of distancing. I mean, the architectural ornamentation that I'm talking about is human scaled.
Right.
This is not human scaled, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yet again, it's different.
I think part of it too is that there's so much that goes into executing something like that. You go back to the Frank Lloyd Wright of the Green and Green, like how the joinery is expressed, or like they could have just put some nails in it, but they it's all made out of wood joinery, and that was the decision by the architect. I think that that's in some ways sort of a luxury today because it's just so hard to build.
1,000%.
It's so hard to. They're just trying to get screws in there that are gonna work and be the right size and not shear off.
Maybe not in your world. Like in your world with set design, I mean, with theme park design, they know they have to embrace it.
Even then, you do still have to adhere to a lot of things.
Like, where do we get the duck through on this one? Where's the structure for that?
Where does the chocolate scent?
Yeah, I was gonna say though, like in her industry though, there's also you're working with. They're not inventing any of the ornament, right? It's all probably based on some sort of narrative or.
A lot of it is fully designed world building of our own take, but I would say you still have to answer to bigger companies,
right,
and their brand.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
Now, Nathan, you brought this project.
Mm-hmm. It's not a hardcore modern example because it is built into a historic facade.
Well, I was just going to say that. I mean, so the only place that we could get any satisfaction is when you have to take the historical thing out on a date. Is that what we're saying here?
Yeah.
When you have to court it? But anyway, I think this is beautiful. Again, though, I would say it's because you start getting smaller scaled. for me,
yes,
that's when the texture,
sure,
the light bouncing around, it's more human scaled,
right.
it's more hand scaled. When you start becoming, maybe
These
this is
bigger
where
moves are not.
they're just more
as
contemporary.
Yep.
Great example, I thought. Great example and beautiful. Okay, so this is where we'll probably want to end up. Now, I look at this Bradbury image. There are many images. This is just one. I will tell you that I think that this space would not succeed the way that it does without the level of ornamentation, visual filigree, texture, and small scale that it has. I would say to make the argument that, like in graphic design, there's a 3-second read, there's a 30-second read, and there's a 3-minute read. Right?
Sure.
And I would say the 3-minute read is what you lose when you lose all the filigree. I could see this being in plainer materials without the level of filigree, the same light, the same shape, the same space, same everything, but without that finer level of, again, human hand tooling, ornamentation, scale, texture, you lose. Your eye is just drawn in so many different directions.
So when we were preparing for this, I heavily disagree. I think you're convincing me a little bit in that last sort of monologue about it. I do. And I think the comparison of different timeline of how you were going to look at something and analyze something, you're convincing me a bit, but I sort of was arguing that I think you could strip out everything in here because the light and the way that this sort of is a labyrinth of space, and how when you actually are walking through it, the experience of that is not necessarily in the ornament.
I would agree with everything you just said. We have robbed this project on our competitions now and again.
I love everything about this project and about this building. I mean, and
the shape, the scale, everything that he was talking about, the the labyrinthian kind of quality. The fact that on the lobby level that's only like 11 feet wide, and the height
where it gets skinny and gets and then
yes. So we have done exactly what you're talking about, where we look just at like the
proportions and
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
And we like that too.
We do. We do like that too. So okay, is ornament crime?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think, granted, I think it's very important to understand that it's not just about recreating or remanifest. It's about learning, appreciating those things. I think ultimately finding what you like in it, what you like about it, and then letting that drive then what you're going to do.
That it'll be interesting where this goes from here.
Yeah.
Is it all going to be CNC, computer-driven pattern making?
Is all of this dead?
Is all of this dead? We have become so modern and so architects less is more kind of thing, that it's hard to come up with an ornamentation that doesn't harken back to or pull on the nostalgia of all of these others.
Maybe we're at the point where it's going to be brought back, because now it's everywhere,
Well,
it's the only thing.
I think it is a
now
little bit. I mean, I was just
like,
thinking about
pastel cartoon things are
That's
done.
right. Well, I do have to say that I think it's an important discussion, and you'll find everything that we just said in almost all of the rest of our videos as well at some point.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for being on the show.
You're welcome, Dulcie.